I'm Mike Hall, the Executive Director of the Three Rangers Foundation, and through our mission and programs, we support the Ranger Regiment's Ranger for Life program by providing experience, guidance, and vetted resources for current and veteran Rangers and their families. We support the Ranger for Life program by providing benchmark transition assistance. We understand that transition is a lifelong event that starts at enlistment. We maintain transition counselors at each of the Ranger battalions, offering timely and personalized support, and the regiment's transition Big Five, which is mentorship and networking, education, financial wellness, VA benefits, and holistic fitness and wellness to active duty as well as veteran Rangers. Central to our approach is our extensive mentorship program, leveraging a network of really about 10,000 formal and informal former members of the 75th Ranger Regiment who provide unvarnished experiences and access to the networks. They know what success looks like. These meaningful relationships allow mentors and mentees to stay connected to the Ranger community and benefit from shared experiences and guidance. Today, we're going to hear mentor advice from Ranger Network mentor Scott Quick on his experience with welding and his Forged by Valor initiative, his Bru-Bag business, and some general thoughts on business development and entrepreneurial skills, which I think 90% of the Rangers all want to do at one time. They want to end up basically working for themselves, doing what they want to do. So, Scott, it's great to catch up with you, and thanks for all you do giving back and have for a while. Why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit about your military and post-military background?
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. So I joined the National Guard when I was 17. I was still in high school, and this is 2000, so right before 9/11. And I kind of always knew I was going to go in the service. Like school wasn't like I wasn't bad at school by any means. I didn't care for it. It wasn't challenging. So my father was a Marine Vietnam veteran and didn't want to push me into the service, but he was like, "Hey, if you're gonna do it, like get some education out of it or do something beneficial." So that's kind of what led me to the Guard. And obviously, shortly after 9/11 happened, and that kind of changed everything. So I came back from my advanced training. I was actually down at Fort Jackson when 9/11 happened, and back then I was a lightweight wheel mechanic, and I got back and volunteered. I went down to the zone. So I was in New York City for 2 weeks. I was there end of October, beginning of November, and I could walk up and look 7 stories down, and like the impact that had on me was like incredible. So I kind of did a bunch of stuff with the National Guard units. I was doing like gate guard stuff, around that was like huge priority. So all the federal buildings, I was doing stuff like that. I did assistant recruiting, and eventually I was hired as a full-time Army civilian technician in upstate New York, and that's kind of where I got involved into welding. So a couple years went by, and I knew it wasn't a matter if I was going to deploy, it was a matter of when. And so that's when I realized I didn't really want to deploy with the National Guard. I wanted, if I was going to go, I wanted to go with something the best. And, I talked to my family and volunteered, went active duty, had to go back to basic training because I was a mechanic and a welder and a generator mechanic. So I didn't have infantry skills. So I had to go back to basic, do infantry school, and then went through RIT back then. And this was in 2005. So I got in a regiment. I think it was August of '05, and within a month or two we were deployed. So I spent what 4 years with First Ranger Battalion, and did 5 tours with them. Ended up going to Ranger School in 2007, and the experience that gave me was founded me what I like created who I am today. All the ups and the good times and the bad times, the struggles and the preparedness. I think really shaped me to be who I am today and how to persevere and get through everything. So after that, after it was 2009, I had a tough decision. I wanted to stay in. You know, the regiment, I had a good relationship. They wanted to keep me, but I had some personal things going on. My father was sick with cancer, so I wanted to spend some time with him. So I ultimately got out of the active duty and moved home, bought a house. My father helped me like redo it. We kind of gutted the whole thing, and I'm pretty handsy, so like we rebuilt it from the frame up. He couldn't do much work anymore, so he just kind of supervised and yelled at me. Uh, and then it spent about 6 months doing that, and tried going to school. I went to college. I still wanted to be a part of the war and in the effort. So I was like, maybe I'll try and get in the FBI, but I need a degree. So I went for accounting and, forced myself to go to school for 2 semesters. And I ended up dropping out with 3 credit hours because I just couldn't stand it. I was like, it wasn't challenging, and the people that were there, I just couldn't be around it. It was a struggle. Like, obviously looking back, I was fighting a lot of, things going on, from being with 30 people constantly that I trust with my lives, to being by myself in a new environment, trying to acclimate toward, to the civilian transition. So, from there, like I said, I spent about 6 months out of service, and I realized, hey, I got to go back to work. And my old job as an Army civilian technician was available, but I had to join the National Guard again. And so that was kind of a struggle. I didn't know if I wanted to do that. Um, and ultimately, speaking with my father, it's a safe job, not the best answer, but, good benefits, safe, reliable, 9 to 5. However, you got to be in the National Guard again. So I finally did that, and kind of got back into welding. And that's where I really, really enjoyed it. Like, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed the independence in the actual skill in welding. And then coming back and realizing, like, I could be in a room full of people. Once you put that welding hood on, you're all by yourself. And if I got a boss or supervisor come back yelling at me or something, I just make some noise or strike an arc, and they don't know what to do, and they just walk away. So, I really enjoyed it. My creativeness. We had to fabricate a lot of stuff being in the National Guard. We didn't have, they were still driving like old deuce and a halves from like Vietnam. So like, you can't buy supply fenders for those replacement fenders. So I'd have to fabricate those from scratch. So I got to do a lot of that creativeness, and I just loved it. I thought it was great. So that's kind of brought me up until, 2015-ish, I think. And wasn't really happy with the guard, as people can probably imagine, coming from regiment. I wasn't, I wasn't fitting in right. Like, I I kept thinking, like, stop checking the box. Like, I've been to war. You guys are going to be going soon. Like, we got to make sure, like, you guys, you don't know what situation you're going to be in. And I don't know if they didn't take it as serious or what. Like, they just didn't have the proper leadership. And not to say all of them, but there was a bunch that it just was a really big struggle. Um, so I tried changing units. I tried doing a bunch of things. I ended up working with the 20th Special Forces group out in Massachusetts, and I was getting ready to go to the Q course, and um, I ended up having a stroke at 30 years old, and still don't know how. Um, but that right there was my ultimate. What do I do? Here I thought I was invincible. You know, I made it through war. I'd done all these things. Like, I was in the best shape of my life. working out multiple times a day, working with special forces up in Massachusetts. And then I'm sleeping and I almost died. So, so I was afraid to sleep. I was afraid to close my eyes. I was like crumbling internally. At that time, I engaged with my wife, and you know, all I could think about was her future, and we didn't have kids yet, but my kids' future. Um, and eventually, I just kind of broke down, and I walked into we have a veterans outreach center locally, and I walked in and I said, "Hey, I need to talk to somebody." And that's kind of what started the chain reaction and the next steps and looking forward. What am I going to do post service? And eventually I ended up retiring. I was medically retired in 2018. So that's kind of a crazy history of my military history.
Yeah. 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 I appreciate all your service, and no doubt you made an impact on that National Guard unit also. So, I mean, sometimes we don't see that, but
Yeah.
you look back and you're going to feel it, and it's a good feeling, I think.
Yeah, and
Obviously,
there's a lot of guys and girls that in the units that, I'd say looked up to me, and I tried to be like the best leader I could. Like I've had crappy leaders, even in regiment we've had, the I don't want to say the hazing, but the those types of leaders back in the day, the ones that just yelled in your face, and then we had, real leaders that I still look up to and wish, I could be them to this day. And that's kind of what I try to take the best of everything that I got and or learned and try to move forward with that. And that's kind of how I still operate.
we got a lot of Rangers that are they're in the welding industry, that are another kind of vocational kind of stuff, and very happy because I mean when you talk about success or happiness after, it's a job, and what you do is part of it, and it's a big part of it, but it's not everything. So how did you become a strong? I mean, you touched on a little bit. I enjoyed your put the hood on. I always enjoyed welding when I was in high school, something I
Yeah.
really enjoyed. Thought I might do one day, quite frankly. And I did the same thing. The shop teacher would come around, and I just put the hood down, and he's yelling, and I'm just arcing away. I was just happy. So yeah, it's nice. But so you're a strong advocate for the welding industry, as I am, because we have a lot of Rangers that have gone out and are doing very well. And tell us why you think welding and fabrication is a valuable skill leading to, rewarding careers, and, what type of opportunities are out there, and what's the current market look like? How do you get started?
Yeah. I mean, right now, if you want to do it, you can go to any shop. We're hurting across the country. I mean, it's not a surprise, right? Like every trade skill right now is pretty far behind. So there's a governing body, kind of the main governing body, American Welding Society, AWS.org. They um, they have statistics out, and what they estimate is roughly like I don't want to. It changes, but I'd say like 350, and I think that's low. 350,000 um, positions over the next 4 years. So that's what we need to backfill. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago where the Navy was in and the Maritime Industrial Base, and they made the announcement that they're looking for 250,000 skilled trades, primarily welders, inspectors, and things like that, over the next 10 years, just for the naval fleet alone. So, the time to get involved in the trades, is now. I've been teaching for about almost 10 years, and I've seen the trend from like when I got into the field and tried going to a union and was shut down because I didn't know my father wasn't in the union or my uncle wasn't in the union. Now they're like, yeah, come in, come in. So everyone's hiring. Pay wise, we're starting to see some good increases. Reputation, we're going away. Like people are starting to realize like you can make some good money in these skilled trades. And the stigma that if you're not good in school, you're going to be okay in the trades. That's not accurate at all. If anything, that's completely wrong.
Great.
And so, you know, people that are good with math, good with science, like welding has everything, metallurgy, the chemistry, the makeup of the actual metals and what we're doing to it when we're striking out an arc on that material itself. So we can't just take somebody that failed school and doesn't have a good work ethic because they're not going to last in this industry. And we need people like Rangers that can put in a full day, that will show up on time, will do the right thing, will be able to be independent, without somebody having to constantly baby them. Um, because I think the latest statistic is like the average age of a welder is like 55 years old. And these people are trying to retire and we don't have anyone to fill those seats. So, the people that we're training today are going to be the leaders in 5 years. They're not going to have that 20-year time period to train to become the leader. It's going to have to happen a lot quicker.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you're a welding instructor and you're a certified welding inspector.
Yep.
So those are unique skill sets that take a lot of experience and knowledge and study to get to that. I mean, you mess up one little spot and the submarine falls apart, right? So it's pretty
Yeah.
pretty it's not just it's like you talked about. It's not just anybody off the street. It's
No.
important for everything. But you providing veterans with that specialized training and guidance through the Forged by Valor, your 501(c)(3, welding school, and you're helping veterans out that way. So what's Forged by Valor all about, and how does that help veterans?
So Forge by Valor is a new initiative I started with my friend and vice president. His name's Ben Cork. He's a Marine veteran. And basically we where we're at in upstate New York, we don't have a program that will allow GI benefits for welding. So the current program I teach at, we partner with a community college, but they won't, due to whatever stipulations, it's a long story, they won't release the funds for the GI benefit. And so I've been fighting this since 2018. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Because I actually went to this school in 2014 or 15, and that's where I met Ben. And at that time, there was, I think, five of us that were veterans, and we still stay in touch. It was like basically being back in basic training where it was 16 of us and half of them didn't know anything about welding. I had experience. Some never even knew what like a screwdriver was, right? So we had 20 weeks to figure this out together and try and get everyone through. And it's not your typical diploma mill, like not everyone passed. I think we graduated with 14 in our class. So it's pretty intense, and it reminded me of boot camp and the camaraderie and things like that. That I was like, holy crap! Like I feel like I finally have a place, right? Like I feel like I finally have direction now, and
Like-minded people.
yeah, and so that stuck with me. So when I finally medically retired from the service, at that time I was teaching nights and weekends. They asked if I could come on more full time. So in 2018, I started teaching the class that I went to, and now I just finished my 34th class, which is kind of crazy to think about. And if you asked me 10 years ago if I'd be a teacher, I'd be like, hell no, like I can't do that. Like I'll get fired. And surprisingly, I haven't. No. No, I treat it kind of like privates, right? You gotta, some people need a kick in the butt. Some people need to be talked nice to, and navigating that, realizing not everyone's a ranger. They don't have that hard charging mentality. And how do you get through to somebody differently? And I find that challenging, and I take pride in that, and I enjoy it. So anyways, I came on in 2018, realized we no longer offer GI benefits, and I immediately started doing research, like what's it going to take? And long story short, basically we needed to have either the welding done on the school campus or one of us or all of us would have to become school employees, and that wasn't going to happen. So fast forward a few years, I was selected to go down to Miami for the American Welding Society Instructor Institute. So I went down there for about a week. It was like a symposium with all the one person from each district. I think there's 22 districts, and talked about leadership skills and things like that. And that really jump started like, hey, I want to do this. Like this is my vision. So I came back and approached my owner, and I asked him like, hey, would you be upset if I created a veteran school? And we figure out whether it's we work it out of your facility or partner somehow. And he was all on board. So that started that, and that was about a year and a half ago. And it's been a long journey going through this, navigating how to create a 501c3, how to create a school for New York State education, like all the paperwork and the documentation and the endless hours of no sleep and presenting in front of boards and organizations trying to raise funds because to be eligible to collect GI benefits, you need to show 2 years of financial history.
Okay.
So the goal is to have funds for the initial 2 years for the veterans to come through. And so far, we've secured 140,000 in funds for tuition, and also we've probably received over $40,000 in goods, whether it's welding machines and other equipment and things like that. So our first class will start this fall, and then that will start the clock of those 2 years. And then hopefully, we sail right through, get a GI eligibility, and then we can beef up the classes, get more students in. And then once I hit 3 years, apparently, from the research I've done, then I can apply for like installation transition assistance programs to be a accredited installation. Like we're close to Fort Drum, so I can go up there and brief the soldiers up there when they're ETSing and things like that.
Yeah. Well, that's for folks that listen to this and are interested. I mean, there actually are more than a couple Ranger associations out there that offer, VOTEC kind of
Yeah.
scholarships, to offset this. And if you go to our education page or you talk to education, there's education counselors at the battalions now, Scott.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah. So you can talk to them and they can point you towards that. As a matter of fact, we are at Three Rangers Foundation. Our board has decided to shift from quote unquote conventional college scholarships to vocational
Oh,
scholarships.
wow.
As a matter of
Okay.
fact, and there's a couple other. It'll dawn on me in a second, but there's a couple other Ranger associations that do VOTEC kind of scholarships. It's interesting, when we point rangers towards resources or people, we have a simple method of vetting them. One, there's a ranger involved somewhere that vouches for it, and two, if it's really a good organization, people will recognize that, and they'll give you the money you need to run it. Which sounds like what's happened with you. I mean,
Yeah.
people recognize you're doing a good thing. They came together, whether it's goods or services or money or space or
Hmm.
whatever it is. They say this is a good thing, so it's a good organization. So hopefully you'll be getting some Ranger buddies up there fairly soon.
Yeah.
Through everything you learned with learning through Forged by Valor and your entrepreneurial experience with Bru-Bag. What tips do you have for business development and entrepreneurial skill building?
So, Bru-Bag was kind of born out of I like to have fun. And for those that don't know, it's an outdoor yard game.
Uh-huh.
Um, Imagine beer pong on cornhole boards. And so I created that for, I used to have parties at my house before I was married and kids and all that stuff, and kind of like the bachelor pad. And that I had a friend approach and say, hey, man, you got to get this. We got to patent this. And I was like, no way. Like, I never thought that could happen. And he kept hounding me and hounding me, and eventually I was like, fine, I'll do it, just kind of to get him to shut up. And it worked. We got it patented. So we he was an electrician, I was a welder. nothing, we knew nothing about business. We knew we had a decent product. How do we market it? And we both work full time. We're both like newly married or getting married, you know, and it was just the whole thing for like 5, 6 years was just trial and error. And we wasted a lot of money, um, because we didn't know better. There's so many scammers out there. There's, you just got to be careful. And I tell anyone looking to start a business, like research, 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 before you pay anything, do as much research as possible, whether it's a marketing plan or, a- attorney fees, like the emails I get on it, and I'm sure you do too, on the daily basis, you're like, holy crap, like stop, like delete, delete, delete. So, and once again, like everyone wants to help, but no one kind of knows how. And the ones that do know, they're not going to tell you without a price. And then another thing is like stay true to your values. Like for me, with Bru-Bag, it's American made. I want to keep it American made. Um, and you know, I, trying to look at being competitive on the stage of yard games, like it's really tough. Like 90% of that stuff is made overseas and it's chintzy and it's crappy. So to keep something American made, you got to have some type of quality, but that's going to come with a cost. So that is, and it's still a learning experience. Obviously, when I started, I had a business partner. I no longer have a business partner. We had,
Common
we had,
story.
what's that?
The common story.
Yeah, yeah. And, we both had different visions. We got kind of fed up with each other, and ultimately I kept the business and he's out of it. You know, tainted the relationship. I known him growing up. I mean, we still talk and we're cordial, but it's not fun. So I'd recommend anyone going in business with a friend, try not to try and figure out an agreement where you don't have to. You don't want money involved in
Or
situations like
family.
that. Or family member. Yeah, exactly. Um, and I think the other big thing, and this is what kind of like Regiment instilled, and same with like growing up with my father, like one of his thing is always have a backup plan. Like even with what I'm doing now with Forged by Valor, I'm not I have other means of income. What I spend, I can spend. Um, I don't want to put my family or, I don't want to put my house up, for sale or default on anything. So have a backup plan, make sure that you don't get yourself too far under is like a big thing to me. I'm huge on my word, like we made some mistakes and spent some money where we probably shouldn't have, and I spent a long time paying that back. Everyone's like, why don't you default or go bankrupt? And I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like I can afford it. um, I don't want that stain on my record. So moving forward, and I still run Bru-Bag. It's very low scale now compared to what we were doing with a warehouse and multiple machines. um, but you know whatever I do now is also worth my time. And that's another thing I had to learn. Like stop worrying about everyone else. Like if you think you got a product that's decent or whatever it is, make sure you pay yourself accordingly. For years I spent time doing something and nothing in return. It was constantly like, oh, I gotta get this order out. Missing family time, missing events and holidays because I'd be on the road to one of the, like a festival or something like that, and not really getting compensated because it was always like, well, we got to push the brand, we got to get the name out there, we got to do this, and in the end, it's like, no, we don't have to. I chose to do that. So now what I do is, I make sure it's worth my time, and I try not to let it interfere with my personal life. At the end of the day, like 5 o'clock, whatever it is, I kind of step away from the computer. whether it's emails or the shop, whether I'm manufacturing something, and focus on, the real quality time with my family. So, and then same thing with Forge by Valor, like I'm moving that into that realm, and I know there's a lot I need to do, but I think I can better manage my time more accurately and more manageable for doing things with that company. And it's made me um, what's the word? More streamlined, I guess. I feel like I'm in a lot more control with Forge by Valor than I was when I did Bru-Bag by every means.
Yeah. Well, you can go to our website and see Ranger Buddies and Ranger owned businesses, and you can find Bag and
Yeah,
yourself up some. And entrepreneurship. We've had a couple other guys that talked in depth. That was this whole subject of the webinar. Al Buford and Kevin Alberti. And it's funny. Everybody says the same things, generally, how to approach it. But if you're interested in learning more, you can hit up those webinars also. But
yeah. I look at all like the failures that I would call them failures as learning opportunities, and I learned a lot. I learned how to create websites because I paid someone $10,000 and I wasn't happy with it. I learned how to do accounting after I went to school for accounting. That kind of helped, but I didn't want to pay an accountant, so I had to learn all that. So like all these like other skills that I learned sometimes because I'm stubborn and I want to do it myself. And then, moving into, like I said, Forge by Valor, I'm now able to step back and allocate some of these things to my board members. And, before I would never do that. Now it's like, nope, all right, you got this under control. I'll oversee it, but I have full faith in you and being able, like I said, the big thing is getting that time back and making sure what I'm doing counts and not just wasting away and spending countless hours every night.
you don't want to. Nobody wants to learn mistakes. Learn through mistakes other people have made. So, got a bunch of Rangers out there that have the similar experience, and if you want to pick their brains, every one of them, just like Scott.
Yeah,
I mean, they'll tell you the do's and the don'ts,
yeah,
and especially the don'ts. So, reach out. Don't try to do it all by yourself. You'll have a lot of hard lessons learned, but don't try to do it by yourself. There's a bunch of Ranger buddies out there that you can trust not to take your $10,000, but
yeah, exactly.
that will give you 10,000, that will give you $20,000 worth of good advice.
Yeah.
So take advantage of the network. Uh, last sort of thing I want to talk about. I ask everybody this sort of at the end, sort of break away from the network mentor of specifically what we're talking about. In your case, the trades and welding and nonprofits and entrepreneurship. But what is success? I mean, you sort of when you did your opening, this is what I've done after the army. We all heard really where you came from, and we see where you are now, and we see you smiling, and so what is success after the military? Do you ever get there? Is it so again some people talk about it's a job, it's not a job, it's a church. Well, it's not the church. It's veterans organizations. It's not veterans organizations. It's family. It's close family. It's extended family. It's not all fishing or hunting. I mean, how did you sort of morph into where you are now, where your description of Bru-Bag and Forged by Valor and the mistakes you learned and how you've settled into that. I mean, what's your advice to folks?
I mean, like I said, always have a backup plan, right? Like I'm fine, my wife and I, like we're fine financially. I really, technically don't need to work at all. I could be fine without any additional income. And, part of that is through the VA, some of that funds.
Yeah.
But a lot of that, I had to fight for. Especially after having my stroke. And like I said, at that point, I was like, I need to plan, you know, what's my family going to be like in 10 years? And looking towards the future and making sure that we have money away and our kids are going to be okay. So, I think obviously success is just being financially stable. That's one of the huge things for me. Making sure, like I said, you don't carry over debt. That's just burden. And it just eats at you. And then to me, it's family. Um, and just enjoying the moment. Like I got little kids, I got a 5 and a 7-year-old. I can't believe they're already 5 and 7, and it's gonna be like that, and they're gonna be 18 and not want to talk to me and out the door. And my son's probably gonna try and go into Ranger Regiment. And I'm gonna be like, no. Um, but just spending time with them, quality time, and being happy with what you do. Um, Whether it's a hobby, you got to find some type of enjoyment in life. Like when I was working as an Army civilian technician, I really did enjoy that position because I liked the coworkers and everything. I didn't like the National Guard part, but I enjoyed work. I enjoyed what I did. I felt it felt meaningful. So finding something that's going to feel meaningful in your life, whatever that is, whether it's you need to volunteer somewhere, if you're not getting that out of your current, job, or just doing something that you feel like's meaningful to you. And that's kind of how I fell into teaching. Once I started doing that, seeing the reactions of the students and hearing the stories about the jobs that they're getting and what they're doing with life right now, you know, knowing that I had some type of impact on that, it's awesome. Um, could I make more money as a welder or as a certified welding inspector? Absolutely. But now I have to sacrifice other things. And part of that is time away from family and things like that. So I'm comfortable. Um, and I guess just live comfortably.
Nah, some really good advice. And you're talking, I'm thinking, back on, my life and folks that I know that, I think are really, doing well out there. And, some people are going to spend their whole, I mean, our years in the Ranger Battalion were very formative and had a lot to do to shape on who we are and how we think, how we treat people, where we find satisfaction. And your point about, I'm a teacher. I never thought I'd be a teacher. And I heard your snide comment. Because you thought you probably have to kill somebody, but but you find satisfaction because you're helping people. And at the end of the day, I think we all look back at our Ranger life, and it's all about the team. It was always about helping other people to succeed,
Yeah.
and that's where it really comes from. And it's never just one thing. You know, uh, it's not the mission. It's the Ranger Regiment and all it encompasses, and the people, and where you learn that there's something bigger than yourself.
Hmm.
That so easily transfers over to other places, but it's just not one thing. And your comment of you're financially you're okay. You
I'm
could
not
make
going to be a
a lot.
millionaire.
Yeah.
I know that, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you could make more money, but if you're
Yeah.
making more money, then you're not doing other things that make you complete, and puts a smile on your face every day, and wants you to get up, and whatever you do, you're going to go to bed saying, well, I didn't get nearly as much done as I wanted to, but that's a
Hmm.
good thing, so you keep going. But yeah,
Yeah.
anything else you'd like to add before we sort of kind of close this up, either about the main subjects we're talking about, or anything else that you'd like folks to.
No, no, I think you nailed it with it's just like regiment. I didn't realize until I started teaching how much experience I had teaching, Ranger
Yeah.
privates, right?
Yeah.
And that we had a different mission back then. And um, like I didn't realize how comfortable I was being in that position. And all it is just sharing your knowledge, you know. I'm not the best at everything. I'm not the best welder in the world. I'll be the first to admit that, but I know some things and I can teach people, and teach people what not to do. And so sharing that information, I think that's something we've lost as a society for a while. It used to be people are afraid to share information with the younger generation because they're going to lose their job.
Yeah.
Now we have this huge gap, and we don't have the information out there. And like you said earlier, one bad weld and a submarine's not going to come back up.
Yeah.
So understanding that, like, hey, the things that we're doing are still very important, and that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to get more tied with the or entangled with the maritime industrial base, because that's just another way to serve. Like, you could go weld a submarine, you could weld an aircraft carrier or anything for the military, and just because we left active duty doesn't mean that we still can't continue serving our country in some way, shape, or form. And that's kind of how I look at it. I'm trying to raise a future generation of welding, leaders realistically.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. It's always, I tell guys all the time when, the young guys that are getting out, they don't want to call the old guys and I'm not going to be able to connect. And I said, listen, you're doing them a favor because, anytime I talk to another Ranger, it's a good day. And,
Yeah,
so, and that's
yeah,
we part of the reason we try to do these webinars is to get out there and people see what other people are doing and go, you know, wow, he transitioned,
yeah.
he,
If
he's,
if
he's doing,
anyone
he's
has
doing just fine.
if anyone has a question, I just a ranger hit me up because he was at the Station Foundation, which I went to a couple
Yeah,
months ago,
great.
and my
Yeah.
name got brought up by Kevin out there, and his son's interested in welding, and
Yeah.
so he's a ranger, reached out to me, and took the time out of my day to talk to him, and I'll answer any questions. I'll try and guide you as best as I can, and hopefully we can get those people coming off like in the right direction. So feel
Yeah.
free. I'm an open book.
All right. Well, thanks again very much. And
Thank you.
from a fellow 175 veteran, I'll sign off and say let Rangers lead the way.
All the way.
Take
Bye.
care, Scott.